China is embarking on one of its most ambitious projects, building a mammoth super dam on the Yalongzangpo River. The project dwarfs even the massive Three Gorges Dam and can provide Beijing unprecedented control over water security for millions of people living downstream. 8 years ago, China did something very strange. They poured billions of tons of unsalted water into this lifeless desert. They did this to fight back against desertification and to bring life where none should exist. Farmers in China's Xinjiang province are turning a desert into thriving farmland by growing apples and harvesting crabs. The results of this were anything but expected. What happened over the next 8 years stunned scientists, baffled locals, and changed parts of this deadly desert. Why exactly did China pour so much water into the desert, and what effect did having so much water have on the desert? Stay tuned because what you're about to find out will blow your mind. Everyone knows that a desert holding water is one of the strangest occurrences to exist, but deserts like the Taklamakan Desert still exist. At first glance, it seems like nothing could survive here, and certainly not lakes filled with fresh, unsalted water. But surprisingly, the Taklamakan Desert has a few rare lakes that hold fresh water. Now, how did this come to be? Well, to understand how these unsalted lakes came to be, we need to look at the mountains that surround the Taklamakan. To the north, there are the Tianhan Mountains, and to the south, the Kunlun Mountains. These mountains are very tall and are often covered with snow, especially in winter. When summer arrives, the snow and ice begin to melt. This melted water flows down the mountains, forming rivers and streams. The most important river in this story is the Tarim River. It is about 820 miles long and runs along the northern edge of the desert. Several smaller rivers feed into the Tarim, like the Arksu, Yarkand, and Hotan rivers. All of these rivers get their water from the melting snow of the mountains. As they flow, they bring life to the land, helping plants grow and creating small areas where people can farm. Now, here's where things get interesting. These rivers don't flow into a sea or ocean like most rivers do. Instead, when they reach the desert, they slowly begin to disappear. The extreme heat causes the water to evaporate quickly, and the sand absorbs much of it. The Tarim River, known as the Mother River of Xinjiang, plays a crucial role in the region's water supply. Some rivers break into smaller streams and vanish, others sink into the ground, forming hidden underground water channels. But when there is a lot of water, like during heavy snowmelt or after a sudden summer flood, the rivers don't disappear right away. Instead, the water collects in low areas of the desert, forming lakes. These lakes are unsalted because the water comes directly from the melted snow and ice in the mountains. Unlike saltwater lakes, which form when water stays in one place for a long time and evaporates, leaving salt behind, these lakes are fresh. The rivers bring clean water from the mountains, and the lakes form quickly before the water has a chance to become salty. One of the most well-known lakes in the region is Lopner. Thousands of years ago, Lopner was a huge saltwater lake. Over time, the rivers feeding it changed course, and the lake began to dry up. Today, Lopner is mostly dry, but sometimes, after heavy rainfall or when the Tarim River overflows, small freshwater lakes appear in the area. These lakes don't last long, some dry up within weeks or months, but while they exist, they bring a rare sight of water in the middle of the desert. Another important lake is Taitima Lake. The sand dunes also play a role in forming these lakes. The dunes are always moving, pushed by strong winds. Sometimes, the sand piles up and creates natural barriers, like walls. When rivers or underground water channels hit these sand walls, the water has nowhere to go and pools into a lake. These lakes might last a few days, weeks, or even longer, depending on how much water there is and how hot the weather is. These unsalted lakes have been important for people in the region for a long time. Now that we know why the Taklamakan Desert has so much unsalted water, we need to talk about the desert's environment itself and why the fact that it has these lakes is such a strange occurrence. Keep watching to find out. Water is nurturing all types of life, and it's just like a great green wall, supporting different forms of life, including the black sheep and the red deer. The Taklamakan Desert is one of the most extreme and unforgiving places on Earth. It is located in the Xinjiang Uyghur Autonomous Region in northwest China. This desert is the largest in China and the second largest shifting sand desert in the world, covering an area of about 130,000 square miles. To put that into perspective, it is almost the size of Germany. The name Taklamakan is believed to mean place of no return, or you can get in, but you can't get out, which goes to show how dangerous and mysterious it has always been. People have long feared this desert because of its deadly conditions, and for centuries, it was a place few dared to cross. The Taklamakan is part of the larger Tarim Basin, surrounded by some of the world's tallest mountain ranges, which include the Tianhan Mountains to the north and the Kunlun Mountains to the south. These mountains not only form a natural boundary but also play a huge role in the desert's harsh environment. The mountains block moisture from reaching the desert, so very little rain ever falls there. In fact, the Taklamakan receives less than 0.4 inches of rain per year. To compare, the Sahara Desert gets about 3 inches of rain a year, which means the Taklamakan is even drier. That's not all. One of the most striking features of this desert is its constantly shifting sand dunes. The dunes can reach heights of up to about 980 feet, which is taller than the Eiffel Tower. These sand dunes are always moving because of the strong winds that sweep across the desert, making it even harder for travelers to find their way. The sandstorms here are fierce and unpredictable, sometimes lasting for days. In ancient times, many trade caravans traveling along the Silk Road were swallowed by these sands, their remains hidden beneath the dunes for centuries. The temperatures in Taklamakan are extreme. During summer, the daytime temperatures can soar as high as 122 degrees Fahrenheit. The heat is relentless, and there is very little shade to offer relief. However, at night, the temperature drops sharply, sometimes falling below freezing even in summer. In winter, it gets even colder, with temperatures dropping to -4 degrees Fahrenheit or lower. The Taklamakan played a huge role in the ancient Silk Road. Because the desert was so dangerous to cross directly, traders would skirt around its edges, stopping at various oases like Khotan and Kasha. These towns became vital trading hubs that offered shelter, food, and water to weary travelers. Now that we know the harsh conditions of the Taklamakan Desert and why it is so strange for it to have these unsalted water lakes, it is time for us to take a look at their effects. The Taklamakan Desert's unsalted water lakes may not last forever, as they are always appearing and disappearing depending on the flow of rivers and the melting of snow from the surrounding mountains. However, their effects on the desert and the life around them are both surprising and important. One of the most important effects of these freshwater lakes is how they bring life to the desert. Most of the water that forms these lakes comes from the melting snow and ice in the Tianhan and Kunlun mountains. Because the water comes directly from snowmelt, it doesn't have time to gather salt like other desert lakes. Instead, it remains fresh, allowing plants to grow and animals to gather. These lakes create small oases, which are pockets of green in an otherwise barren land. For people living near the Taklamakan Desert, these unsalted lakes have always been a lifeline. The Yugur people, who have lived in this region for centuries, rely on the rivers and lakes for farming. Towns and villages often form near these water sources, allowing people to grow crops like cotton, melons, and grapes. Without these seasonal lakes, farming in such a harsh desert would be almost impossible. These lakes also provide drinking water for both people and their livestock, especially in the summer months when the heat becomes unbearable. Even though the lakes may not last long, their impact on daily life is undeniable. Dunes move even more freely, swallowing up land and making it harder for people to farm or live nearby. There have been efforts to protect and restore some of these lakes. One of the most famous examples is Tit Lake, which had almost disappeared by the late 1900s. In 2000, the Chinese government released water into the Tarim River, and slowly, the lake returned. To everyone's surprise, the lake was filled with fresh, unsalted water, which is a rare and hopeful sign that the desert's natural balance could still be saved. This project not only brought water back to the area but also revived plant life and encouraged birds and other animals to return. At the end of the day, the unsalted lakes of the Taklamakan Desert are more than just pools of water in the sand. They are symbols of life and survival in one of the harshest environments on Earth. While they may come and go with the seasons, their impact lasts far longer. As the world changes, protecting these lakes becomes even more important, not just for the desert, but for the people and wildlife that call this unforgiving land their home. Now that we've reached the end of the video, what do you think about this desert? Do you believe that the fact that it holds water is good for the earth? Let us know what you think in the comments section. Don't forget to like, follow, share, and subscribe for more. Also, click on the next video on your screen, you'll enjoy it. The last major disaster warning was given less than a month ago, and the resulting flood was so severe that it buried most of the lower streets under running rivers powerful enough to sweep off many cars in its path. What was the cause of this disaster, and what makes it so unique? Join us as we examine the recent flood that sunk Dubai over 3 meters deep. The unexpected flood on January 3rd, just a few days into the new year, the Dubai police notified the public of a sudden flood sweeping hundreds of cars across multiple routes in the city. The floods were so drastic that many motorists had to use special routes to avoid getting swept away by the running waters, and as a result, these roads quickly became busy from immense traffic. Among these roads were the famous Emirates and metro pathways. Flights at Dubai International Airport were being diverted following heavy rainfall and major flooding. Unlike most of the roads that recently got flooded in Saudi Arabia, these routes had drainage systems built in to prevent intense flooding. So, while most lower routes like the Alada and Idad roads sunk under over 3 meters of water, many civilians were still able to move along the higher roads leading to safer areas. Sadly, that wasn't the end of the story, as there were many more problems on the horizon. As if traffic congestion wasn't bad enough, the higher roads were also flooded, albeit not as much as the lower pathways, with water levels high enough for the authorities to reduce the speed limit by a huge margin to prevent accidents. Rain fell across Dubai, Abu Dhabi, and other areas of the Emirates that morning. Realizing how the situation was only getting worse, the authorities gave more warnings for high winds and sea storms in the coming hours. It started as a slight rain that began shortly after 4 a.m. in Dubai and slowly got worse as time went by, building up as growing clouds moved from the seas through the previous night. While the loss of property wasn't very significant, many saw it as a divine sign hinting at a much bigger disaster coming later this year. To find out why, let's step back to a similar event that occurred in Dubai at about the same time last year that led to something much worse. The Persian Gulf floods. January 3rd last year was another frightening day for meteorologists at the UAE Storm Center, as many signs hinted at a possible flood occurring in a matter of days. But there wasn't enough evidence to prove it. That didn't stop them from telling everyone about it. Sadly, this concern didn't go beyond the walls of the research center, as many people were too busy to plan for an event the experts weren't even sure about. With this in mind, it was business as usual until the evening of January 14th, when light rain fell across the city into the night. Many saw it as a refreshing break from the long drought, marking the start of the long-awaited rainy season, as it was for certain years. According to immediate weather forecasts, this rain was expected to end before daybreak, but it proved them wrong by growing more intense with each passing hour. By noon the following day, the rain had only gotten worse. Roads were flooded, and many schools and businesses couldn't open for the day. All flights were either delayed or cancelled, and experts called it the city's heaviest rainfall in over half a century. The storm ended 2 days after it started, and experts believe it was caused by the low pressures moving south from the Red Sea. This brought in a lot of moist air to the region. Add this to the already warm waters of the Persian Gulf, and we have the perfect recipe for a long thunderstorm that could last for days. It was a great lesson for experts and average civilians alike, a warning that things weren't always as they seemed when it came to the region's climate. This meant weather forecasts could be wrong a lot of the time, and people would do well to prepare for something like this in the coming years. What the experts didn't know was that the short flood was only a warning sign hinting at a much bigger disaster set to happen in just a few months. Tonight, Dubai is cleaning up from the chaos and bracing for more extreme weather to come. This happened on April 16th, the day when Dubai and many other parts of the UAE were greeted with a much bigger storm. Unlike the last one, the rains this time were much heavier. The floods were so bad that CNN called it a year's worth of rain happening in a single day. It affected all 7 Emirates, caused by bigger moist winds arriving from the Persian Gulf. It was also a huge blow to the city's economy, with total damages costing over $2 billion to fix. The UAE, at this point, had done its best to build high roads that could handle floods like this, but this proved that there was still a lot to be done. To make up for this, the leaders announced a new project that promised to increase the city's drainage capacity by over 700%. While these steps are commendable, they did little to stop the more recent flood of January 3. With similar signs now hinting at a much greater flood this year, many believe Saudi Arabia's recent floods are about to happen once again, this time in Dubai. Here's how a warning from Saudi Arabia came. On the dry, cold morning of January 6, the National Meteorological Center issued multiple red alerts to warn civilians about upcoming rains heavy enough to cause a great flood. This warning came just 3 days after the flash flood that recently occurred in Dubai, and just as they predicted, the intense rain started the following evening. The resulting flood was severe, covering many cities, including Mecca, Medina, and Jeddah, in a matter of hours. The busy streets turned into running rivers, with the highest rainfall happening at Al-Shafia in B Governorate, followed by Jeddah's Al-Basatin with a slight difference. Just like the similar Persian Gulf flood, this too was caused by low pressures moving moist and warm air from the Red Sea. Whole cars with people inside were swept like weightless balloons, making many wonder if places like Mecca even had a drainage system. The storm was so great that it brought up a religious controversy on the true cause of the event. While some believed it could be explained by natural means as it had always been with floods in the past, others believed it was a purely supernatural event. Despite this, after the storm was over, many experts at the National Meteorological Center got to work immediately to find natural causes behind the storm they weren't aware of. Sure, they already knew it was caused by low pressures and warm air, but after seeing how much damage this caused, they had to know if there was something they could do to prevent it from happening again. Flood the city several times over, especially when the rains are only getting heavier. Let's also not forget that large-scale projects like this always affect natural ecosystems and the animals that live in them. The tools used to do this also leave a high carbon footprint, contributing even more to the existing problem that causes increased flooding each year. It would also cause problems for the yearly budgets to come, as the money that could be used for restoring lost properties from upcoming floods would have to be used for the ongoing project. Each flood would be greater than the previous one. The next one, expected to hit later this year or in early 2026, would affect a lot of things, including the city's roads, buildings, and public services. Many roads would be closed, public transport would be almost non-existent, and emergency services might take too long to respond. Many could lose their businesses, and the economy would face a much bigger hit than the one it's still recovering from. All these things could happen if the city doesn't invest more in their drainage systems with a much shorter plan in the coming months. While it might cost a lot at first, using less expensive methods like building dams and improving their early warning systems could go a long way in reducing the loss of property. As of now, experts at the UAE Storm and National Meteorological Centers are working hard to track abnormal weather patterns and give warnings to prepare for the upcoming threat. So, until the next big warning happens, we just have to wait and see what Mother Nature has in store for the beautiful city. Saudi Arabia, home to Islam's two holiest cities, Mecca and Medina, which draw millions of Muslims worldwide every year during the annual Hajj, has been seriously grappling with challenging climate patterns. From severe droughts to high temperatures, extreme dry conditions, pollution, and worst of all, a rise in water levels that has haunted the nation with flash floods, all of which come with their severe consequences. For context, let's look at the factors that have shaped Saudi Arabia's weather over time. The country's geography plays a crucial role in determining its weather patterns. As we all know, Saudi Arabia is primarily arid, with vast desert areas like the Rub' al-Khali, also known as the Empty Quarter, which is one of the largest sun deserts globally. Moreover, Saudi Arabia has an extensive coastline along the Red Sea to the west and the Arabian Gulf to the east, and these coastal regions impact its weather patterns. Saudi Arabia's desert climate is pretty extreme. During the day, temperatures can get scorchingly hot, while they drop to very low levels at night. Rainfall is scarce, and sandstorms are not uncommon. The country's climate can be divided into two main regions: the coastal areas along the Red Sea and the Arabian Gulf, and the interior regions. The coastal areas, like Jeddah and Jizan, have a more moderate climate because they are near the sea. The humidity levels are higher compared to the interior regions. The temperatures are generally milder, with summer highs ranging from 30 degrees Celsius to 35 degrees Celsius, 86 degrees Fahrenheit to 95 degrees Fahrenheit. Winters are colder than the desert region, but the humidity makes it feel more uncomfortable. These areas also see occasional rainfall, especially in winter. On the other hand, the interior regions, including cities like Riyadh and Al Khobar, have a harsh desert climate. If you enjoyed the video, make sure you like, share, and subscribe. Also, click on the next video shown on your screen. You will enjoy it.